right, I am joined by Lisa of the Manson Cases. How are you doing today?
Good. How have you been doing?
Confused. That's why you're here. You are here to save me because I can't keep track of everything that is Manson. There's too many moving parts, but thankfully, there's a really wonderful community of you, Stand By Your Manson. Oh God, I can't remember. Marilyn Manson Uncanceled, obviously Colonel Kurtz, and Justice for Brian Warner.
Yes, that's right.
There are several, and if I'm forgetting somebody, please just tag me. I apologize. I can't remember all of them, but thank God you guys exist.
I understand where you're coming from when you have to try and piece together this whole situation, because legal declarations are one thing, but then there's other things that have happened since the accusations first came to light in February 2021.
Recently, you broke a story about the FBI investigation through the legal documents that came out, but I also wanted to talk to you because you found a police incident report that was put out, and I got to thinking that there's a pattern here. I don't know if you've thought about it, but it seems that, and I'm going to say it could be Evan Rachel Wood, it could be Illma Gore, somehow between the two of them or someone near them, police reports, FBI reports, law enforcement is being weaponized against their enemies. Have you thought about that?
You know, I haven't thought of it from that perspective, but you're definitely onto something there. To me, my biggest concern is this weaponization of using the media to make accusations. And then once those accusations turn out not to be true, they're still further weaponized. And we see that with the Johnny Depp trial. And I already see that with this one, and it hasn't even started yet, where they're comparing Amber Heard and saying that us, quote, pro-Manson people who are just trying to elevate the truth of the situation as being against these accusers and Evan Rachel Wood. But once you actually look at the legal declarations, including her own words and even some of the accusers, it's just not adding up.
Now, if I recall, you started out against Manson, correct?
It's that halo effect. You have these beautiful actresses, personal assistants, whatever their career path is, coming out against Marilyn Manson, the persona who is this violent, quote unquote, artist, shock rocker that brings these issues to light, when in fact, he's just a musician, an artist who wants you to think about what you're looking at. But now there's this sort of misinformation campaign, per se, to put him in this light when it was largely understood, at least for several years. He's been around since the 1990s, but now it's the, quote, monster in plain sight, and the media narrative just goes with that.
You know, that's a great point, and I'll have to put that up on the screen. You're talking about the halo and horn effect. Obviously, he's the horn, and the halo with the women. Really, really good point.
Right, and he's different than other artists today. You know, he started as someone, in essence, making fun of American culture, even down to the name. Marilyn Manson comes from the name Marilyn Monroe and Charles Manson, both complete opposites, but both elevated in American culture. In fact, Charles Manson was on the cover of Time magazine. And it's this dichotomy of two different people in American culture that were celebritized, which is what created the band and image Marilyn Manson.
Yes, and my show partner, Mark, actually, when he was working at National Lampoon, created serial killer or mass murderer playing cards with just that type of thing in mind. We do, as a culture, have a tendency to elevate monsters.
Right, and then you have Marilyn Manson, who during his entire career since the 90s always had internet rumors. I'm sure you've heard the internet rumor in the 90s that he was, you know, either on some TV series, and then the famous one that he removed a rib.
Wonder Years.
Wonder Years, that's what it was. But and even with Columbine, where the news when it first broke was that these kids that went out in the school were wearing Marilyn Manson t-shirts, were wearing the makeup, and the media largely fell for that, even though it came out that wasn't true. And in fact, these children, didn't even like Marilyn Manson. They thought he was a joke, and he was chastised for that for years. So this is a guy that's very controversial, especially in the 90s, that's still controversial today. And if you remember, because I believe you're as old as I am, the FCC tried to get involved immediately after, because it was also an election time frame as well. So the media, the politics, it all slammed on him, and he was in effect canceled at that time. And it really wasn't until years later, when Michael Moore released his documentary Bowling for Columbine, that he was kind of vindicated in a way.
Yeah, or at least he was able to answer very famously when he said, what would you say? He said, I'd say nothing, I just listen. And that's the one thing nobody has ever done. Something like that, which is cool. And I'm only bringing all of this up because it's really, I think, extremely important, not only for the case, but also for the effectiveness of the proxy assault, is the best way I can put it. And where I'm going with this is we have, just when I was talking to you, 3 cases that I could think of. 2 that I just mentioned. A false FBI report that was used now in a weird way, because it was using Manson as a way to keep a child away from a father who's another third party.
Right. It's one thing to say in a custody battle and even provide a fraudulent FBI letter to try and make certain claims that, she claimed she was part of this high profile investigation, and even use certain terms that I can't repeat without you getting flagged on YouTube. But yeah, and then eventually it was leaked in the media several months later at the end of 2021. And that's how we know that there was this fraudulent FBI letter created, because she forgot to put it on FBI letterhead. So it's no wonder that it eventually leaked into the media. It eventually got to Marilyn Manson's attorneys. And it looks like she tried to do it for her own benefit, to try and keep her son away, but then also make these public accusations against Marilyn Manson, which are looking less and less to be true. I mean, it's my own personal opinion at this point, based on the legal filings, declarations, that it was an orchestrated hoax. And I definitely foresee, my personal opinion, in the future, we're going to see more of this probably come out in court.
Yes, I think we definitely will, but we are already seeing potentially things coming out now. These are affidavits or statements. I don't know would be the proper term, but they've been released by the legal team. And why it's important, I went on and on with you about his image, is because it's very effective when you're trying to say, I am afraid for my child from this, see the monster over here, to work the custody and also to get it out there. Plus, having the veneer of the FBI legitimizes it. And from what I understand, the FBI actually did work with at least people related to Illma Gore and Evan Rachel Wood for the Phoenix. Was it the Phoenix Project?
They called it the Phoenix Act nonprofit, which she and Illma Gore incorporated. Well, it might be proper to say Evan Rachel Wood with Illma Gore on those documents. She filed to incorporate the nonprofit in California right before her famous congressional testimony, which largely quietly accused him by saying it was someone she was in a relationship 10 years prior, which many people connected those dots back in 2018 and 2019. So while the quiet part wasn't being said out loud, a lot of people had this assumption for years that she was talking about Marilyn Manson.
You mean like somebody else who said 2 years ago?
Right.
Famously in a very recent trial?
Right.
That they wrote an editorial. They didn't name, but they said 2 years ago, in case anybody couldn't figure it out.
Right.
That's funny. It's very interesting. Okay, so we have that. And now you have Illma Gore, aka Ashley Gore, twin coming out and saying, yeah, I actually have a broken iPad where this FBI letter was drafted.
Right. And it was gifted to her by Illma Gore to start with.
Now, here's the funny part. And okay, because this statement, I'm sorry, this is just shocking. She's talking about a communication that she had with Evan Rachel Wood. This is Bryton Gore communicating with Evan Rachel Wood through Signal. And one of the points of discussion was that her sister said that she had died 3 months prior. And fortunately, we have this statement where she's saying that, reports of her death are premature.
I know. And, I heard that rumor when I first started looking into this, but this is the first time it's come out on a legal declaration, which is, a penalty of perjury for her to sign that. And there's a lot more in that same essential sworn statement.
And then, yes, right up, it says, the conversation moved to what I saw on the broken iPad and Illma's discarded items. Quote, I told Wood that I had seen a letter supposedly written about her by an FBI agent, and earlier that year, I witnessed Illma doctor the same or a similar letter. In other words, that I knew the letter was a fake. Wood's response shocked me. She said the letter was so important to her work against Warner and told me to think of what would happen to her and the victims if this ever got out to the media. I offered to send Wood or her attorneys these materials, but she declined. Now, that is very interesting, and I know I keep bringing up little echoes, but somebody just lost a major defamation lawsuit, and the first thing they said was, look what this does to the victims.
Right. And what victims to start if that's the case? And, it's worth pointing out Bryton, who accessed these documents on that broken iPad, also found evidence that Ashley Walters, former Marilyn Manson personal assistant, provided Illma with screenshots or text messages giving Illma Gore access to Marilyn Manson's social security number, addresses, social media logins, and even people he was around, such as other women.
As a matter of fact, now you could confirm this because I'm speculating now. I'm not as deep into it. Is Ashley the fulcrum that got them the ability, Illma and Evan, the ability to reach out and collect, if you will, other women to come forward, specifically one being, I believe her name is Greta?
This is my understanding because all of these women are linked with Ashley Walters, and some of these women have been friends for years, including Ashley Walters was friends with Evan Rachel Wood, Esme Bianco, and all that. So it's always been assumed, or at least the rumor that I saw for months since I've looked into this, that Ashley Walters was the key. So for her to find this information on that iPad is just very damning. And considering Ashley Walters also came out to accuse Marilyn Manson, sue him, and then have that lawsuit be dismissed with prejudice as well.
Yes, it just was dismissed.
Right. Mm-hmm.
Like, literally within a day or so, which is fascinating. I'm very interested to how that's going to come out, because apparently there's other information like texts from Ashley Morgan Smith line, possibly from DMs, but that's going to be another subject down the road. What I want to go into now is we've just covered there's the FBI letter. Now we're going to briefly talk about his swatting. Now, there's arguments whether he is swatted or not swatted or whatever, but the bottom line is the police were called on Brian Warner, aka Marilyn Manson, and it is part of his lawsuit, and he does name it as swatting by, it appears, Illma Gore and or Evan Rachel Wood. Again, I don't know exactly who, so I want to be really careful on what I say. but I believe he is accusing them both of doing that.
So my understanding, and this is not direct quotes from the declaration of Bryton Gore, aka Marilyn Manson, is that it was Illma Gore, and it was confirmed by his attorneys, if I remember correctly, that it was Illma Gore, a quote friend, calling in because they couldn't get a hold of their friend or something to that effect. His latest filing says it happened multiple times. Well, when these accusations first came out in February 2021, days later it was reported that he was, quote, being investigated or I should say swatted, but it was to look like something more than it was, is my understanding from the declaration. So while the media reported one thing, in actuality he was being swatted. And it's worth noting, too, his new declaration said it happened multiple times.
There we go. Oh, by the way, I look for patterns, and I apologize. I'm going to slide this one in here. Remember that Bryton was dead?
Right.
Well, another statement was also released with these documents from Polar Weiss.
Yes.
She was also dead. So apparently, if you piss these people off, you're either going to be dead or arrested.
Right. What a weird pattern. And apparently, if my memory is correct, Paula Weiss, if I pronounce that correctly, was on Colonel Kurt's YouTube show and discusses hearing the rumors or somehow it getting to her. So not direct quotes, but that's what I'm remembering from watching the videos. And she apparently, Illma Gore was telling people she had been dead, but Paula Weiss was like, well, no one called my parents or nothing like that. So don't direct quote me, but it's something to that effect. So Illma Gore, it sounds like, speculating, she was telling people that this girl was underage, was dead from this groupie video, when in fact, according to her declaration, she was 21 or 22 years old, in a relationship with Marilyn Manson and highly involved in this, quote, horror film called Groupie, which ended up on a VHS back in, I think, 1996.
I don't like seeing, if you will, civilians brought into things. Like Marilyn Manson is a public figure, and no offense to him, and I know it may not be fair, but he does put himself out there in the public, so therefore he's going to be catching a whole lot more flack. He's a public figure, he's there, he's going to get flack. However, this last attack is on his wife and Leslee Lane.
Right. So my understanding of Lindsay, her name's Lindsay Usich, well now Lindsay Warner, is they both got married in 2020. She's a photographer, but as far as my understanding, she's very low key. You don't really see her in the public a lot unless she's with Marilyn Manson. And Leslee Lane is a former roommate of both Marilyn Manson and Evan Rachel Wood, because she was dating a personal assistant at the time of Marilyn Manson.
Okay. And therefore, this attack is now direct. We're starting to get out of the Manson sphere, and we're attacking specific people. Now, what exactly went down? Because this involves a police report and really some kind of nasty claims.
Right. So the timeline starts with February 1st, which is when all these women, including Evan Rachel Wood, came forward on social media with their accusations of, all these different forms of, say, abuse. And shortly after, on February 2nd, Leslee Lane starts posting photos on her Instagram account, which don't look good to Evan. It's her dressed as, quote, I believe it was Ava Braun of the Dead, on a Halloween party in 2007. At this time, one of the accusers that is suing Manson right now, Ashley Morgan Smithline, had come out and claimed that Manson had beat her with a Nazi whip. This was the first kind of story we had heard about Nazism or anything, was from Ashley Morgan Smithline. So a few days later, after Leslee Lane keeps posting these on her Instagram account, all of a sudden, Evan Rachel Wood posts these accusations in her Instagram stories that essentially Marilyn Manson is an anti-Semite, would call her these names because she was Jewish. But if you go back at her history, she claimed no religion. Maybe she was brought up Jewish, but that changed. So yeah, that's really where it started, was these accusations against Leslee Lane and Lindsay, Marilyn Manson's wife, about wanting to, I guess, blackmail or threaten her. And she shares a screenshot of a supposed police report from December. Now, when she shares the screenshot, you can't tell when the date is, if I recall off the top of my head, but it was supposedly proof that she called and she tells these stories. To me, it looks like she was trying to get ahead of the story of those pictures, rather than admit to the fact that she dressed as this. Maybe back then it was some sort of joke or whatever it may be, but those are things today which could cancel someone's career and could go against what she was claiming then.
They were claiming that she was underage.
Yes, that is one of the big claims, was that she's, quote, underage, and that's how that starts. She was 20 years old in 2007 at this party. So she likes to play these games of how she's this young, unknowing actress. She grew up in a fantasy world kind of thing, according to her Phoenix Rising documentary. But she was dating Marilyn Manson at 19. They met at 18 while he was still married to Dita Von Teese. And over the years, they have both said their relationship did not start until after the divorce. And because he divorced on January 5th, 2007. Now, whether or not that's true or not, I don't know. I'm just going by what they said back then in several interviews. And even she said several interviews years ago that she was 19. But she's trying to claim now that she's underage, she's groomed.
And when you're inebriated like that, you can't consent, especially as a minor.
And even in her declaration that she provided in her custody court battle with the actor Jamie Bell, she said that she was, I'm not going to say the word, but groomed, but meaning so in an underage fashion, when she's only ever claimed, even in her own documentary and even in the past, that they did not meet until she was 18 and dated at 19.
Okay, and the result of this report, which you tracked down, because people were very confused. They couldn't find anything, and then you figured out, hey, well, maybe it wasn't Los Angeles, and took the initiative and actually found the report out of Tennessee. But ultimately, it was stating that no direct threats or blackmailing were made to the victim.
That's correct. And I think the problem was, it wasn't just that it was in California. It also is considered an incident report and not a police report, which I guess are two different things. I'm not too clear on it, but I had to make 2 phone calls. And even then, I wasn't sure if it was there. But in Evan Rachel Wood's Instagram stories, she shares the case number. So all I had to do was Google Lens the top part to find out where did this come from, this citizen's notification, whatever it's called. And it led me to the direct website to the actual location. So then all I did was make 2 phone calls and hope for the best based on what I knew from that screenshot. And lo and behold, they emailed me one day a copy of the incident report that said it was unfounded, which is interesting because I would assume she would know that. Right? So she would know that it was probably unfounded, because it says right on the incident report, which she blocks out, that she could access that incident report within so many days. So why would she block that out? Which is a little weird.
And what do we have here? Another name that's on this report, person 1, who I think may be OP1, I'd have to confirm, who is the one who notified her of the situation, is Leslee Gore.
Shocking, isn't it?
Go figure.
So let me back up and give you some more information. So these Instagram posts she posted, I believe, around February 5th, which is a few days after the February 1st accusations. This Police report is supposedly from December 2020. Okay, so she confirms with her partner, Jamie Bell, of going to meet him with their son, or at least I'm in town so I can drop off my son to you on December 22nd. And so around the same time is when the police report comes out, at least, that it's filed on her end. And so it looks like now there's some conspiracy there where she's trying to keep her son and using this police report possibly in this custody battle as well. I'm not clear on that, and it's not clear from the legal declarations. However, the legal declarations do include court documents from the custody battle of Evan Rachel Wood and Jamie Bell, and it's all around the same time period where Evan Rachel Wood decides to email Jamie and say, I'm a key witness in this criminal investigation. For our safety, we have to stay here. And she keeps her son away from Jamie Bell based on this seemingly fictitious information, because these screenshots apparently were from months before then. And Illma Gore was aware of them and even DM'd Leslee Lane to warn them that they filed these police reports back in December. And based on my source of information, the Discord screenshots that are supposed to be conversations between Marilyn Manson's wife, Lindsay, and Leslee Lane, one, are not even, Lindsay is not in that conversation. Two, you can't even tell who's in the conversation based on that. But three, according to a source, those Discord conversations are edited to look a certain way, which I truly believe that's the case based on what I've learned so far.
Very interesting. I just realized everything that makes sense for timing. This is, again, you got to give some credit here. It appears, dual utilization of events. This may be because it could look bad for a mother to dress like Eva Braun in a custody dispute.
Right. And,
So if you, let's say, well, that really wasn't me. It wasn't my fault. I was forced into it. That would be an interesting defense.
Right. And to add to that, there was at least a half a dozen people there. And as far as I can recall off the top of my head, at least two of those people, one of them was Leslee Lane, have spoken out and said that's not the case. She was someone who was already known to be into drugs and alcohol, and she was the one who provided some of these drugs. So it's a little interesting to get that aspect. And what's also interesting is that her brother was there. Evan Rachel Wood had her brother there. In those Instagram screenshots, she blocks out his face. But I found the original photo on an anonymous forum and confirmed that was her brother. So why would she block out someone who could speak out on her behalf? I mean, maybe that's nothing, but there's also the fact that there are half a dozen people present. And so far, the people that have spoken out give a different story.
Very interesting. So to sum it all up, because I'd love to have you back to talk about other angles, but this one I want to just keep it tied in there. We have at least 3 incidences, maybe even more. I have a feeling if, I'm so happy that Bryton made that statement, and I hope that Bryton will reach out to someone and perhaps come on and tell her story. But Illma Gore appears to have not only inspired Amber Heard potentially, but also Jussie Smollett. I mean, Jussie did his whole hoax. And yes, folks, I'm calling him a liar. I'm calling it a hoax. He's convicted. See, I can call Amber Heard a liar. She's convicted. Or not convicted, but she lost the case. So I'm going to write on the jury and I'm going to say she's a proven liar. She defamed. She lied. Jussie Smollett, convicted. Actually served time for it. Illma Gore did the same stunt, or very similar, of being beat up by a Trump person because of her art. So there's a lot going on with that. But again, what are we involving? Authorities.
Right, and it's really hard to tell, what we're going to find out next, because it seems like anytime more court documents drop, we're learning something that just blows your mind.
Yes, and from what I understand, poor Bryton has probably had a really, really bad time with her sister and maybe has suffered some of this firsthand. I don't know. I'm projecting, and I hope Bryton will come forward and confirm with somebody.
Right.
But to wrap it up, there's our events for the day. We have essentially a fake FBI report, a little bit of baby swatting or whatever you want to call it, and going after other people, maybe preemptively, for putting something out there someone participated in, and it's not illegal in any way.
Right.
But it doesn't matter what Lisa and I think. Want to know what you think. So please comment below and let us know. Are we off base, or do you see a pattern too?